Hi, Mama. Hey, I've got a question for you. Are you being affected by the motherhood penalty? Did you know that mums overall end up being traditionally less successful, yes, than men, but also other females who ended up not having children? My name is Elizabeth Gulliver, and I consider myself a mum championing mums. And I would love to capture the attention of women who have raised young children and who are now getting a little bit of time back for themselves. But instead of allowing that time to be sucked up by what's nearest and most convenient, let's look at how we can create a life that means that the rest of your life you're living from a heart-centered space and that you're living your dreams. Now, I will be interviewing mostly mums who have gone through this period and who are now doing amazing things. So if you are a morally and spiritually focused feminine mama who enjoys traditional family values, this will be great for you. Now, it's my podcast and I love talking about femininity as well. I love talking about spirituality and I love talking about the whole family and how we can win together. Now, if you're curious about that motherhood penalty, then I have put a little quiz together for you that you can get free in my toolkit. You'll find it on elizabethgulliver.com. Okay, on with the show. Okay, hello everybody and welcome to today's show. We are very privileged to have a very special lady with us today. Her name is Mia Hanks. She's actually a survivor of narcissistic abuse. She was married to a covert narc for 29 years and she has written a memoir called Bridemaid, and that was out in February, and that does go through what it is like in a day-to-day situation to live like that, and of course offering advice to anyone who might be in a similar situation. So Mia, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I really appreciate it. Now, my podcast is called Mama's Time to Shine, and which means that you actually went through all of this whilst you're a mum. Is that correct?
That's correct. I was married about 6 years probably before my first child was born.
Yeah.
And then I have two children, and they're 4 years apart. So yeah, much
Wow.
of my marriage, I was raising kids.
Wow. And so when did you start to realize that you were in an abusive relationship? How far into it would you say?
It really wasn't that early on. I think looking back, there were definitely red flags, but I kind of chose
Yeah.
to ignore them. I think
Yeah.
I came into the marriage young. I was 21 years old, and I was
Yeah.
naive. And,
Yeah.
you get into a marriage and you think, well, it's my responsibility to make it work. And
Yeah.
so you do kind of, or at least I did, I ignored a lot of things that I shouldn't have ignored, and I just tried to normalize what was going on in my house. And it wasn't, it's not something that's obvious to the outsider.
Right.
So it's very manipulative, and it's very psychological, mental abuse. And so it really
Yeah.
isn't, I think it takes longer to realize what's going on. And then once you do realize, you're kind of so far into it that getting out seems rather daunting.
Are you able to give us a little bit of an insight of what it was like on a day-to-day basis when you did understand what was going on?
Yeah, it really wasn't until probably maybe year 27, that I really
Yeah.
started digging in and doing some research. By this point, my kids are, one's in college, and one's getting ready to graduate high school. But
Wow.
that's when I really started to think, this just can't be, this is just, it was getting worse. So narcissists, a little bit about narcissists, they don't get better with age, they get worse.
Oh dear.
So it just deteriorates year after year after year. But yeah, the whole time that I was raising my kids, it just, I just sort of accepted it. But day to
Hmm.
day life, you asked, basically, not every day was bad. That's the other thing that I think a
Yeah.
lot of people don't understand. There were good times too. And you
Yeah.
can kind of refer to those as breadcrumbs. He would
Right.
drop enough breadcrumbs just to keep me hanging on there. But it was an incredible amount of control.
Yeah.
Everything was micromanaged, everything was criticized, everything was, it was just mental abuse all the time. I was
Wow.
made to think that I couldn't leave, that I couldn't make it on my own, I wasn't capable. And so it just sort of beats you down, and
Mm.
you fall into something that is really, uh, what's referred to as Stockholm syndrome,
Oh, yeah.
and you start to just accept it. And I,
Yeah.
I ended up, I will fully admit that I would defend him. If
Yeah.
my parents said to me, I think he's awfully controlling, or,
Yeah.
we really don't like what we're seeing, I would defend him, because it's
And I'm
just
sure you've looked
programmed.
into it quite a lot. Would you say that that's typical?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, yeah. The term they use now is trauma bonding. And a
Okay.
lot of people, you end up trauma bonded to your abuser because they're controlling your whole life. And you start to
Right.
think, well, I guess I can't manage without them. And you
Mm.
start making excuses for them. Well, they're
Yeah.
acting this way because their job is stressful. And, just excuse after excuse, trying to basically lie to yourself and tell yourself, no, this is normal, this is totally okay. So
Yeah.
that's how I went for a long time, a lot of years.
Right. And what was going on in your home that made you start to twig?
Probably just the level of control got to be more intense as the years went on.
Yeah.
And it was to the point that, my time was not my time. I really had to answer for anything that I did. If I wanted to watch, anything I wanted to do for myself was almost prohibited. And it became suffocating to the
Yeah.
point that I just thought, I don't. And I guess the real trigger, of why I started doing some digging and researching was my physical health was being affected,
Okay.
by the constant stress, the constant fight or flight response.
Yeah.
I was having so many physical symptoms, chronic pain, headaches, uh, stomach problems, just anything you can imagine. And
Yeah.
it was sort of like my body, I just felt like my body was breaking down under the stress.
And do you think subconsciously then you knew what was going on before you did consciously?
Yeah, I knew there was something not right. I just didn't have a name for it.
Yeah.
And then when I started doing some research, and I just started looking up things like toxic marriages and taking all of these online quizzes that, is my relationship toxic? And
Yeah.
basically I landed on narcissism, and I mean, it checked every single box. My ex-husband is a textbook case of a covert narcissist. And then it
Wow.
really all made sense. And then I sort of gave myself permission to start thinking, I need to get out of here.
Yeah. Yeah. And was that a very, very scary thought initially?
It was scary. Like I say, my kids were more or less grown at this point. So, I at least didn't have to worry about how do I get out of here and fight him for custody and all of these things. I just mainly had to worry about how to get myself out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely it was scary. I didn't know what his reaction was going to be.
Yeah.
And, narcissists, you don't tell them no. They don't accept the word no. So it was a big step,
Yeah.
and yeah, definitely scary. But looking back, I'm glad I got out, obviously. And I think a lot of people end up not leaving these relationships because of fear and
Yeah.
embarrassment, fear and embarrassment. But
Yeah.
it's just kind of, you kind of bite the bullet and say, I don't care what other people think. I have to do this for me. And for me, like I say, it came down to my health. So it
Yeah.
was just, I had to get responsible, take responsibility for my mental health and my physical health.
Yes. Absolutely. So I'm so happy that you did. And what triggered you to actually say, no, I have to do something for me? I mean, was it that your health was deteriorating quite badly, or was it something else that happened?
Yeah, I was just so miserable, and it's sort of, all the stars sort of aligned. And we had sent, our oldest off to college, and
Mm.
my youngest was a senior in high school, and it just, it all kind of fell into place.
Yeah.
It just, there was sort of an opportunity, a kind of a window that I thought, you know what, I've got the opportunity right now that I can get out, and so I took it. But yeah, it was more just circumstances kind of all lined up for me.
Yeah.
And I was able to, I moved in with my parents, who lived
Yeah.
about 10 minutes away from me.
Oh
So it
God
just
bless
all
the
worked
parents.
out. Yeah,
Mm.
yes, definitely. It just all kind of worked out. The timing just worked, and I, I saw an opportunity and I ran. So more or less, that's how it went down.
And do
But
you
it
feel
is
like it
something that
affected
I
your
had been
children?
thinking about for,
Sorry, say that again.
it is something I had been pondering for a long, long time, but just thought, I'll never have the opportunity to get out.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that must have been amazing when you realized that you were doing it.
it was. Yeah, it was scary and it was exciting and mostly scary. Um, but yeah, there was definitely, I started to see a light at the end of the tunnel.
Wonderful. And you just said about your parents. I mean, God bless parents who are there for their adult children. I just my parents have been there for me a few times as well, and uh, it's such a blessing. And it's
It really is. I when I left and when my ex-husband realized what I was doing, I didn't leave abruptly. I kind of more or less snuck away little by little.
yeah,
But when he realized what I was doing, he was angry,
yeah,
and then ensued the financial abuse. He was draining the bank account. I couldn't access any money. So really, if it hadn't been for my parents, my only option would have been to go to a women's shelter.
right, yeah,
And I think a lot of people are faced with that decision. Do I
oh,
stay in
yeah,
this relationship or do I go to a shelter? And
yeah.
for a lot of people, they don't want to go to a shelter. So
No,
I was very lucky in that respect.
yes. So let's give a big thanks to those wonderful parents of yours. And how about
Yes.
your children? Um, Were they really aware of what was going on, or is it because often when you grow up in a situation, you can't really see it for what it is?
Yeah, they didn't witness any like fighting or anything. I mean, like I say, it was all just very psychological. And they didn't so they didn't see a lot of conflict, but kids are smart and they're intuitive. So yeah, they knew that it something was, it didn't look like the way everybody else was living. They knew their dad was something was off.
Yeah,
um, but they kind of they knew it, but they never really said anything to that effect. But now that I look back, they knew a lot more than I thought they did at the time,
right. Have
for
you
sure.
spoken to them about it now?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
And it's funny because what they both agree on is they wished I would have left years ago.
Wow.
I thought that staying for the kids is what you're supposed to do. You don't break up your family. You don't, you stay for the kids, you make it work for the kids. But
Yeah, that's what people are
it
taught, aren't they? And they're taught that that's the right
that's
thing
how
to
we're
do.
taught. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, but no, I can say with the utmost confidence that that's not the right thing to do in an abusive situation. And
Yeah,
the reason is that, even though my kids didn't witness anything physical, I mean, it was just like I say, it was all psychological. But even so, they didn't get to see what a healthy relationship looks like.
yeah, yeah,
And so what they learned was what an unhealthy relationship was.
yeah,
They didn't get that blessing of being able to see what a marriage should be.
yeah.
And so for that reason, it's really staying for the kids is that's just a myth.
Agreed.
um, it's just not in their best interest.
No,
And I know
absolutely.
that, custody battle and family court with a narcissist is just a nightmare of the grandest proportions. But in retrospect,
It still would have
my
been worth
kids
it.
would, yes, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
I
So
mean,
my
you,
kids will take this, will live with this, that they've witnessed this toxic relationship, and they have to learn now what a healthy relationship is. So I think it was damaging to them, absolutely damaging.
yeah, and I mean, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because you thought you were doing the right thing, and as you
Yes,
say, after a while, you would have got sucked into this almost Stockholm syndrome.
yes, absolutely.
But at the same time, you can't really blame yourself too much in terms of the damage it gives your kids. I mean, yes, I understand you
Right.
can up to a point, but then also they're learning what a relationship should not be. We can look at it that way,
That's
can't
true.
we? We can look at
Yeah,
it in that they can see what not to do in a relationship, and especially if you're talking to them about it, if you're able to have conversations with them about it.
yeah, we've talked a lot about it, and I wish we had had these discussions when I was still married.
Yeah.
When they were growing up, I wish we would have had these discussions, but we didn't because I was basically hiding this. I
Yeah.
didn't want to admit that there was actual abuse going on.
Yeah.
Um, and it really, I would say it affected my older child more than my younger.
Interesting.
I think my older one is my daughter. And I don't know if being a girl, if it just had more of an emotion, took more of an emotional toll on her.
Yeah.
But, she struggled through her teen years and she self harmed and had a lot of mental health issues. And
Oh,
looking back,
mm,
I didn't really know why, or I kind of just surmised that this is kind of what teens do,
mm,
and obviously not all of them, but just kind of trying to figure out what was really going on with her. But it was just living in this toxic environment. It
yeah.
really did affect her mental health.
Yeah.
So had I left sooner, I mean, I think I could have spared her a lot of that mental anguish
Yeah.
that she went through. Um, but like you say, she also knows what a toxic relationship is now.
Yes,
So hopefully it
absolutely.
goes both ways. She knows,
Absolutely.
what you don't want.
Exactly,
That's what
that's
she got
sometimes
to
that's the way we
witness.
have to learn things. And ha has
Hmm.
she been able to speak to anyone or get any kind of help, to help her through the sort of the process of understanding what went on?
Yeah, she's been through a lot of therapy,
Mm.
still is in therapy. And I think the most helpful thing though is she and I have been able to really talk about this. And I've been able to admit that, yeah, this was, this was not a good situation. This was
Yeah.
abusive. And she has actually read my book, and she found out things in my book that she didn't know,
Wow.
things
What
that
was that
happened
like
that she
for her?
never knew.
Was she
I think she
shocked?
wasn't surprised. She wasn't surprised, but it was sort of like, huh, I never knew that happened, but
Yeah,
doesn't really surprise me.
yeah,
So I think that was interesting that she got to read it. I think she understands my viewpoint better, and
yeah.
I think maybe she understands why I stayed even when I shouldn't. So these discussions with both of my kids have been, I think, very therapeutic.
And has your youngest read the book?
He has not. He probably will eventually.
Yeah.
He's just not much of a reader.
Yeah, I know that's fair enough.
But we've talked a lot, and he knows a lot that he didn't know
Yeah,
back then. And yeah, I mean, and also, I've talked with my kids a lot about with their relationships,
yeah,
and my son has a girlfriend, and my daughter has a boyfriend,
yeah,
and I have talked to them a lot about, hey, these are the things that you want to avoid. These are the red
yeah,
flags you want to look for.
yeah,
So I think I've been able to kind of give them some advice that maybe someone who hadn't lived through abuse, maybe they wouldn't know.
yeah.
So hopefully they're a little more in tune to what to look for and what to be wary of.
Absolutely. And I would imagine reading the book for your daughter, that might have almost been a type of therapy in and of itself.
I think so. I think for her it was. I think she was glad that I finally just admitted that, hey, this our life wasn't okay.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot because there's an embarrassment factor to that. I think
Yeah.
as humans we want to have this facade that everything's great. It's
Yeah.
like how people post on Facebook. They
Yeah.
only post. They're not going to post
Happy,
things going
jolly.
on in their
Yeah,
homes that are.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's that whole like Facebook culture
Yeah.
where we want everybody to think everything's okay. So to actually have to then go and admit that no,
That it
things
hadn't
weren't
been.
okay.
Yeah.
It's very humbling. It's embarrassing.
I can imagine.
And because my husband was a covert narcissist, there was not a single soul that
That would have
knew
expected.
how bad things were.
Yeah.
Nobody knew except for my parents.
Yeah.
And so it's embarrassing because then you think, well, no one's going to believe me,
Yeah.
and that in fact is kind of what happened. Everybody just they think I'm crazy, and they all side with him, and you just have to be willing to let it
Yeah.
go.
And would you imagine there are a lot of women? I mean, obviously, I know men as well, but this is addressed to mums and ladies. So, would you say that there's a lot of women that are going through the same thing?
Yeah, I know there are. I have a TikTok account and I have about 7,000 followers.
Hmm.
And my posts are just flooded with comments and messages all day long. And it's primarily women.
Right.
And, I'm reading comments saying things like, this is exactly how I'm living.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, this sounds like me. And so many women are out there posting and commenting on my page saying, I need help. I
Yeah.
can't get out. What do I do? How do I
Mm.
get away? I'm
Yeah.
scared. So I think there are a lot more women than what we
That
what we
we're
think.
aware of. Yeah. And it is.
And in my case, it's interesting. My ex husband is a very wealthy man,
Mhm.
and we lived in a very high socioeconomic area and beautiful home behind gates.
Yeah.
And people think, they look at your lifestyle and they look at this house you're living in and they think, wow, these people have it all.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of narcissism tends to sort of, you find more of it in these higher socioeconomic
Oh,
groups,
really?
and you really do. And I mean, it's everywhere, but this real, like the narcissistic personality disorder, it does seem to be, you know, pretty rampant
Yeah.
among these higher socioeconomic. So, I just, people think, oh, you've got a perfect life, you've got this beautiful house, everything's great. But you really have to stop and wonder, how many of these women living in these big, beautiful homes are actually suffering,
Yeah.
and you're embarrassed to tell anybody.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So
And
I
would you
think
say that
that,
a lot of
this,
them, because I think did you say it was about 6 years before you realized anything? So would you say a lot of them, it comes on so slowly that it's almost imperceptible at first?
yeah, definitely. You before you realize it, you're so far into this thing,
Mm.
and probably, you've got kids at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, it goes back to, I'm not going to break up my family. I'm not going to, have my kids be children of divorce.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing. It messes up our facade of the perfect all American family.
Yep.
So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Exactly, as if that was the thing that you should be that worried about anyway. But unfortunately, it is for some people, isn't it? It's but I can imagine you would be sitting there thinking that "Ugh, everyone thinks I've got this perfect life, but I just need to be free."
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And just knowing that people aren't going to believe you
Yeah.
because all they see is this wonderful, kind, humble husband, father. He's perfect. Nobody's going to believe me.
So would you say,
So
because we were just saying how it can be very difficult to detect at first, do you know if there are any signs that people can look out for in a prospective partner?
yeah, the first thing that I would tell people is pay attention to how this person makes you feel about yourself.
Okay.
And pay attention to how they treat other people,
Hmm.
and also just pay attention to their lack, or you know in my case, zero empathy. Are they empathetic? Can they self-reflect? Can they put themselves in your shoes and see things from your perspective?
Yeah.
um, my ex-husband had no empathy. So I think one of the biggest red flags that I saw soon after we were married is, I at some point I had the flu or I was sick or something, and rather than being, sympathetic and saying, oh, I'm sorry you're feeling bad, how can I help you, his response was to be angry.
Uh,
It just didn't fit his agenda for me to be sick.
Right.
It wasn't convenient for him,
Right.
and everything was about him. So that was a big red flag. And you
Wow.
think, well, that's weird.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, who gets mad at their spouse when they're sick?
Yeah.
Um,
It
and you just kind of brush
yeah.
it off. And the next day, he's nice again.
Yeah.
And you just say, well, I'll just put that in the back of my mind and forget it and go on.
How interesting. So do you
But
think
yeah,
they're
these
able to
red
help?
flags,
Sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. Oh, I just said these red flags, don't ignore the little things. It's the little things. things.
The little things, you're right. And do you think that they almost know enough that they are narcissistic in that they can hide those parts of themselves publicly? Because obviously you said that everyone thought he was this wonderful
Yeah.
person, so perhaps he doesn't show those sides of themselves that are not empathetic, for example.
Right. And in public he's so empathetic, or he appears
Okay.
that way. He's not. And he knows he's not. But he knows that that's the side of him he has to show to, they want everybody to like them. And so he shows that side to, and then he can manipulate, if he
Wow.
can get people on his side. So yeah, they do know, and he can fake empathy,
Yeah.
but he's not empathetic.
Wow.
And I think they do know enough. They can't self-reflect, so to speak, but they know how they feel, and I don't think they feel empathy.
Wow.
I'm not sure a lot of them. And when I say them, I'm talking about not just people with narcissistic personality traits,
Hmm.
but I'm talking about people with actual narcissistic personality disorder.
Right.
Um, they really can't, I don't think they're really capable of feeling empathy. Maybe some are to a small degree, and it is a spectrum disorder. It
Right.
is.
Okay.
So,
Some people
some
have
may not be
traits and some people have it full on.
right. And my ex-husband would be like at the end of the spectrum, like probably one of the more severe cases.
Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry.
So empathy and compassion, it just doesn't exist in his world.
Wow. And so you said your children went off to college and that was almost your ticket out of there, really. Would that be?
It really was. It was sort of like I kind of had them situated, and I could do it without really disrupting their life too
Yeah.
much. So it wasn't a huge family event, so to speak.
Mm.
It was more like I just went and moved in with my parents, and
Yeah.
I really didn't know what my kids were going to say. I
Mm.
didn't know if they were going to be okay with it. But they both were entering new stages of their lives,
Yeah.
so it was sort of like there was a distraction there for them,
Yeah.
so I could kind of work behind the scenes
Yeah.
and not really involve them too much.
Yeah.
Um, like it would have involved them if they had been little. Obviously, that would
Yeah.
have been a huge life change for them. But yeah, they both were, you know, they were not the least bit disturbed by the fact that I left, and in
Wow.
fact came to me later and said, "Why didn't you do this like 15 years ago?"
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And what did it feel? So let's go back to when you left left and you went to your parents' house. How are you feeling in that moment?
the biggest thing I was feeling at that moment was guilt.
Wow.
I had, yeah,
So you
just
couldn't even have that moment of
absolutely
feeling elated and free. You were feeling the
no,
guilt.
no. Extreme guilt. The other thing narcissists will do is they love to play the victim.
Right.
So he was guilting me, making me feel horrible about. He kind of swung from being all victimized, and he's so sorry, and he's gonna whatever, and he can't believe he's left alone, to the other extreme where he's just angry
Yeah.
and he's draining bank accounts. It was nuts. But no, I dealt with so much guilt. It was uh, and I considered going back. That's how
Wow.
that's how guilty I felt.
Wow. After all your
Fortunately,
effort.
I had people talking to me
Yeah.
that were
And you
saying
managed to stay strong.
I did. But yeah, the guilt was just, and the guilt lasted quite a while. I would say I was dealing with guilt for a good year and a half.
Wow.
And finally, I was able to break free from that guilt, and then life got a lot better.
Okay, so the happy feelings did eventually come.
They absolutely
Oh,
did.
that's wonderful.
Yes, yes. But it took a while. You do feel guilty. You think, and what I kept saying over and over is, I've ruined his life.
Yeah.
And I was seeing a therapist at the time who said, no, he ruined his life.
Yeah.
He did this.
Yeah.
You just did what you had to do, but he did this.
Yeah.
It took me a while to accept that.
Wow.
But she was right. She was right.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so when you did start to feel happy, what was that like for you? Did you
A
feel
bit
free?
overwhelming. Definitely free. It was a little overwhelming. You know, I had been micromanaged and controlled, and it was like, wow, what do I do with myself now? You
Mm.
know, being able to make my own decisions, control my own finances, you know, spend time how I want to spend time
Yeah,
without being made to feel guilty.
yeah.
Um,
That must have
it
been
was it
it
was
did it
so
take a while to
freeing.
adjust to those feelings?
Definitely took a while, yeah, because I just wasn't used to having that much say so over how I spent my time and what I did.
Yeah,
So yeah, it just and it's been probably about 2 years now, and I'm still just every day I think, wow, I can like do what I want to do.
yeah,
So the newness of it still hasn't worn off.
yeah.
I find it very exciting. I feel better physically now than I felt in probably 20
Yeah, so your
years.
health has improved?
Definitely.
Mm,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well,
Um,
stress is one of the biggest factors in ill health, isn't it? So I can only imagine what
it
that would have
really
done to your
is.
body.
Yeah, and you know, one tactic that my ex-husband used, whether he realized it or not, and it's typical of most narcissists, but you know, I kind of was sleep deprived all the time.
Uh-huh.
And you know, I was made to feel weak or you know less than if say I needed to rest.
Yeah,
It just wasn't acceptable, and so I lived with such deprivation for probably the last 2 to 3 years of my
yeah,
marriage. Um, that you know, just being able to go to bed when I want to go to bed and sleep
yeah,
as long as I need to sleep, I think that catching up on my sleep
yeah.
um, really was a game
Oh,
changer
how
for me.
wonderful for you. I'm so happy for you. That's absolutely brilliant. Oh,
Yeah, it's been good. I have not looked back once. And once I was able to free myself of all the guilt, yeah, I'm kind of with my kids. Like, why didn't I do this 15, 20 years
yeah.
ago?
And
But
have you managed to free
hindsight is
yourself of the
2020.
guilt?
I have, you know,
Great.
it was interesting. My big breakthrough moment came when I was actually talking with a friend about feeling so guilty, and I said, you know, every day wasn't bad. Like
Yeah,
there were some good days, and I just don't. Did I do the right thing?
yeah,
Because every day wasn't bad. And my friend said, you know, there are not enough good days in the world to make up for one day of trauma that he put you through.
right.
And I thought, you know what? I think you're right.
Yeah,
And that was really a turning point for me when I realized that I was trying to make a math equation out of it. You know, I was saying, well, a good day cancels out a bad day.
yeah,
But in fact, that's not true.
yeah.
You know, we could have lots of good days, but nothing cancels out trauma.
So good. And so when did you decide to write about it? Is it when you got to that space of having the guilt leave you that you felt you were able to write about it?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I had been doing so much research toward the end of my marriage about narcissism and just trying to learn about all of this. And everything that I could find book wise, it was all very academic.
Mm,
A lot of it was many of the books are written by therapists,
mhm.
which it's great information. But, you know, what I really wanted to hear was a firsthand
Yeah,
account. I wanted to know what does it really look like day to day?
yeah,
You know, how can I compare that to my life?
yeah,
And I just couldn't find that out there. So, yeah, I had never written before, but I thought, you know, maybe a memoir would be helpful
yeah.
to some of these people out there that I know are going through the same
I
thing I
have
went
no
through.
doubt that's
Just
going to be
yeah,
amazingly helpful.
I tried to include. So it's a very, it's not a long book, and it's a very easy read. And what I did is I set it up in, it's a series of short stories,
Mhm,
chronological, all the way from meeting my ex-husband to all the way through till our divorce.
mhm.
And you know, I try to illustrate just little things, you know, just little things that would happen that you know were still abuse, but little,
Yeah,
all the way from the mundane kinds of abuse to you know things that were a little more dramatic.
yeah,
So I tried to show kind of the full spectrum of you know what 29 years would look like.
yeah. Yeah, because that's a long time to be going through that.
It is,
Very
yes.
long time.
For sure, it
Yeah.
really is. Yeah.
So do you feel like you're finally coming to your own now?
Yeah, definitely. It's been kind of fun. It's sort of like I have to reevaluate and say, what do I want to do when I grow up? I sort
Yeah,
of feel like
absolutely.
like I'm just getting out of high school or something,
Yeah.
and I got to figure out what I want to do.
Yeah.
Um, so it's been fun just getting to do
I bet it has. Thinking of you
yeah
for a change, what do you want to do? What
yes
do you feel like? Because obviously you've
yeah
learned so much. I mean, normally when I say this, you've learned so much through having children, but obviously you've also had to go through a very steep learning curve, through a very challenging situation as well. So you will be a very, very different person now than you were before you got married. And therefore, what does
definitely
this new
yes.
person want? What do you envisage for yourself from now? Obviously, you're doing this incredible job of highlighting this situation, and through that, you'll be helping so many people. Is this something you will continue? Do you want to do this plus something else, or are you still finding your feet?
Yeah, I'm still figuring it out, but I really am enjoying just trying to, get out there as much as I can,
Yeah,
and try to spread awareness, because I do think this is a huge, huge problem.
yeah,
And yeah, it definitely, I'm not the same person that I was, and maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, but I tend to be more skeptical of people.
yep, understood.
It sort of changes the way that you look at people.
Yeah,
I'm always looking at people's agendas. What
yeah,
what is your agenda?
yeah,
Um, I don't find I'm as sociable as I used to be, and not that I ever was that much, but I'm just more cautious,
yeah,
a lot more cautious. And like I say, that can be good and that can be bad.
yeah,
But it has definitely changed my priorities. And realizing what's important
yeah,
and what's not important.
yeah,
That's probably been the biggest way that it's changed me. It's changed my outlook on everything.
yeah. Wow. And so if you are giving people advice as to what to look out for, obviously you've given us a few red flags to look out for. Would you say any of this comes down to generational trauma of the person?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I can totally understand the concept of generational trauma now that I've lived through this marriage, and how these things affect our
Mm,
kids. Witnessing these unhealthy relationships, and then our kids can then, hopefully not, but they see this, and they could hold on to some of these toxic traits
mm,
and pass those along.
mm,
So it does become this cyclical thing
mm.
where you want to break that
Yes,
generational curse,
yes.
right? You want to make sure that doesn't continue on into the next
Because
generation.
it can be broken
um,
with thought and attention. And do you know of your ex-husband having difficulties when he was growing up with new generation?
he did, as is the case with almost everyone with narcissistic personality disorder. They have one thing in common, and that is neglect,
Okay,
in their youth. And in my ex-husband's case, it was emotional neglect. His emotional needs were not met,
okay.
and it was easy to see. And things like that that did create this personality disorder in him, because narcissists will then use this as a kind of as a way to shield themselves. So it does stem from their childhood,
Yeah.
and then they get married, and then they show these toxic traits to their kids,
Mm,
and you hope that your kids don't continue to, learn from that toxicity, and pass it on to their
yeah,
kids.
yeah.
So yeah, definitely is important to break that curse by saying, okay, here's what you don't do.
Yeah,
Here's what you look out for. We've got to break
yeah,
this.
definitely. And it's so great that you've been able to talk to your children about that. And it sounds like they're definitely on the path of making sure that that is now broken with them, stops with them.
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's very important. Yes.
Wonderful. And so throughout this whole period of going through all this abuse, but then still being a mum, I often ask mums about their relationship with their femininity. Did you find it, because if I'm remembering correctly, am I right in saying some narcissists don't like their partner to shine?
Oh, they do not. No, absolutely, they do not. Your job as their partner is to just uphold their false persona to the outside world,
Right.
basically. They're very jealous. You know, they're jealous of their partners. They're jealous of their children.
Yeah.
They're jealous of their pets. They're jealous of anything that takes time, that takes your time.
Yeah.
So you know, it was a juggling act raising kids because you know, if I gave them too much attention, he was mad.
Wow.
So I was just, you know, trying to play to both
Yeah.
sides, and there's not enough of you to go around, is what I found.
So you obviously you had the difficulty of having less time for yourself because you had children, but then you also had that added difficulty of having a partner that didn't want you to look after yourself maybe. What was that like? And when were you
Correct.
able to then spend time on yourself? And what is your relationship? Well, was your relationship, what is your relationship with your femininity now?
Yeah, I had no, you know, I there wasn't time for
Mm.
myself when I was raising kids. I called myself a single parent.
Right.
He, of course, would say that is not true,
Yeah.
but for the most part, yeah, anything difficult I was left to deal
Right.
with because it was inconvenient for
Yeah.
him. And then, of course, you know, if he had to have all my attention 24/7,
Right.
so there was no time. It was the kids and him,
Mm.
and that was all there was space for. So it wasn't until I left really that I was able to say, "Huh, you know, what do I need to do for myself?"
Mm.
And so it's been a journey figuring that out. But yeah, I found when I left, I didn't really even know who I was anymore.
Wow.
I mean, my identity had been swallowed up
Yeah.
by him years ago.
Was your
So I've been on this
femininity squashed
journey
by
of
him?
um, maybe, you know, I just didn't know who I was.
Mm.
I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted.
Yeah.
You know, people say, what's on your bucket list? I didn't have a bucket
Right.
list. I couldn't think of one single thing. In fact, it was in a therapy session, and the therapist asked me, tell me about your bucket list. And I said, I don't have, I mean, you know, and she said, well, there's got to be something. And I said, no. I mean, because I've never even considered it. Like, it's never been a consideration.
Yeah.
What do you want to do? What are your goals? I had no idea.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Would you say that you've had a connection with your spirituality? Has that helped you at all?
Definitely. Yes, definitely. That's kind of, you know, that's kind of what has gotten me through,
Okay.
really,
Tell me a bit about
is
that.
just knowing that, yeah, you know, I mean, I spent a lot of time in prayer through all of this and just feeling like, did I do the right thing? And I just feel like it's been very, I guess, what is the word I'm looking for? Just that everything lined up for
Yeah.
me. That was what was so amazing. You know, the cards just all fell into place that I could get out,
Yeah.
and then I feel like the right people were placed around me,
Right.
and it was too much to call it a
Okay.
coincidence. You know,
Yeah.
the right people showed up at the right
Oh,
time for
wonderful.
me,
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, when I look at it, it's kind of overwhelming to see how everything worked and fell into place. Just, you know, there was just this path for me to get out and the right people to help me heal.
Yeah.
So I feel very, very fortunate.
Oh, that is absolutely wonderful. Um, and do you now have moments where you're able to pamper yourself and enjoy indulging yourself? Um,
Oh, definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I get to spend a lot more time just thinking about me,
Mm.
which is, you know, and then I feel selfish.
Okay, so that's still
But
something
I
you need
have
to
to tell
work on.
myself, yeah, yeah, yeah. I still have that selfish feeling a lot,
Okay,
but yeah, I kind of wake up in the morning and I just decide what I want to do and what would make me feel good about me.
great.
So it's a very liberating place to be.
And do you have some friends that you enjoy spending time with that you might not have been able to before?
A few, yeah, a few. Not very many. Like I say,
A
you know,
select group.
most of my friends kind of went with my ex-husband.
How interesting,
So
really?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I basically, you know, I had to just let that go,
Yeah,
and it bothered me a
yeah,
lot. But I just realized that's a part of my life that I need to, I need to find a
Yeah.
new life and new people.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have been able to spend time with friends, and I didn't have any friends when I was married, for the most part. We had
Yeah.
friends,
That's
like
what I
mutual friends.
assumed.
Um, yeah, but from the perspective of having to spend all my time with him, there
Mm,
wasn't time for friends that weren't mutual
yeah.
friends. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the most of the mutual friends then went to his
Went with
side of the
him.
fence. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Wow.
I mean, I guess, people tend to follow money. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but that's who they chose to take up with, and I just have to, I can't beat myself up about it, or really analyze why did they do that. I just, I have to tell myself, let it go. You have a new life now. You don't need that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Mia, is there anything that you would like to say to the mums that are listening now? Any kind of advice you would want to give, either to help them live their best lives, or just to help them understand if they are going through something similar, that they could actually escape it?
Yeah, I would like to tell people out there, first of all, I heard a quote once that said, if you find yourself Googling someone's behavior in order to understand it, that's probably the biggest red flag you'll need,
Wow. Yeah.
or biggest red flag you'll see. So that is, yeah, if you are feeling the need to research why your partner is doing some of the things they're doing, please know that's a red flag.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is, don't ignore the little things.
Mm,
Those little things add up to
mm,
big
yeah.
things. And lastly, I would say a lot of women, especially out there, feel stuck because of financial abuse.
Yeah.
Um, you're not stuck. You're really not stuck, and you don't have to stay. And you don't stay for the kids, because your kids are probably going to be better off if you're in a better space mentally.
Mm.
Your kids will be too.
Yes, indeed. Oh, what a brave, brave woman you are, Mia. Thank you so much for bringing this to light. You didn't have to, but you chose to. And it's gonna, like you said, when you were trying to find books on it, it was all quite clinical, and you wanted there to
Mm-hmm.
be something from a personal perspective. And that's the gift that you're giving everybody else. So, on behalf of everyone else, I want to say a huge thank you to you. Um,
Thank you for having me.
Now, if anyone wants to learn more about Mia, there is her website is miajhanks.com. I will, of course, put that in the show notes. And of course, you can go and find her book, Bridemaid. Where can people find your book, Mia?
Anywhere online books are sold, so Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, Target. It's available in paperback and ebook form.
Perfect. So no excuses, all available.
That's right. Yes, available everywhere.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mia. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day and an amazing life.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye bye. Once again, thank you so much for having taken the time to watch this podcast. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you have some comments, I do love reading them, so go ahead and leave a comment for me. If you're a mum and you have an inspirational story that you think would help other mums, then why don't you get in touch with me at info@mamastimetosshine.com, so you can also be on the podcast. And if you haven't liked and subscribed yet, please go ahead and do so. Okay, till next time, bye.